Ahead of Prime Minister Modi's visit to Canada for the G7 summit, once again the nexus between Pakistan and Khalistani groups has been exposed. There's a lot of debate around the Prime Minister's visit for the G7 summit to Canada amid conversations both in Canada and India on what the outcome of this summit and this visit can be at a time when relationships have barely started mending, if you can use that word, between India and Canada. I'm Barkha Dutt. You're with the Mojo story. On the program today, we look at how to read these images from Canada. Yet again, separatist groups, terrorist groups affiliated to Khalistan have taken to the streets in Canada just days ahead of Prime Minister Modi's visit to Canada for the G7 summit. These images have exposed the Pakistan-Khalistani nexus, but the meeting also comes at a time when relationship between India and Canada remains strained. In fact, there's been a huge debate over whether Prime Minister Modi should have accepted this invitation, the invitation clearly coming under pressure from the other member countries who spoke about how India was simply too big to ignore. What might happen on the sidelines of this visit? How do we read the India-Canada equation? And what about Canada's continued patronage of Khalistani groups? Let me introduce our guest today as we continue to look at what the images tell us about Pakistan, Khalistan, and Canada's role in all of this. My colleague Zafar Iqbal is with us as well. Zafar, welcome to the program. Kushal Mehra, one of the most outspoken voices against the Canada-Pakistan-Khalistan nexus, because actually that's what it is with us. We're also joined by Daniel Boardman. Daniel, as a Canadian, has been calling this out again and again and again. Has anything changed with the new leadership at the helm of Canada? We'll find out. Sanjay Lazar is with us. Sanjay is, of course, a victim of the Kanishka bombing. He lost his entire family in that bombing, and he's been traveling through these countries trying to create awareness of justice for the victims of the Kanishka bombing. How did that go? Is anybody paying attention, or does this continue to be a lonely struggle? We'll find out in a moment from now. And also joining us is veteran diplomat, Ambassador Dilip Sinha. Welcome, namaskar, everybody, to the program. Let me start with you, Ambassador Sinha. What do you make? You see, for those of us who've been following this space, the images of Khalistani flags, supported by Pakistani groups comes as no surprise. But seen in the larger backdrop of the Prime Minister's impending visit and the entire collapse in India-Canada relations over this issue, how do you look at it? And how do you look at the Prime Minister's decision to participate? The Canadians coming under pressure. They tried at first to exclude India. The rest of the world, community would have none of it. How do you look at the overall picture, Ambassador Sinha?
Well, I would give the new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, the benefit of the doubt. At the press conference where he mentioned about this invitation, he seemed to give a clear indication, without saying so, that he does not wish to carry the baggage of Justin Trudeau. That we have seen in the campaign as well, and the platform on which he was elected. So he did mention that there was consultation. He said that he consulted some of the leaders, and he came to the conclusion that in this conference, a country like India could not be set aside, because he put India's participation in the context of the G7's outreach to developing countries, the democratic global south, on issues like digital networking, these rare earths, their trade, infrastructure. In all these contexts, he felt that a country like India could not be kept out. Now, we all know that the G7 itself is going through a very difficult period right now because of its internal turmoil. And in this situation, perhaps it is important for them to reach out to all democracies in the world. And he mentioned specifically that India is the most populous nation in the world. So India cannot possibly be excluded from any discussion on these important issues. So I think we must give him the benefit of the doubt. He wants to make a break from the past. Yes, there will be problems that we'll have to face with the elements in Canada which are opposed to any kind of relations with India. But we have to, as I said, give the benefit of the doubt to the new Prime Minister and try and make a new beginning.
Okay, so is this a new beginning for India, Canada, and can that beginning be made in light of the images, the word sort of deja vu that we have seen on the streets of Canada? Let me first play out Carney's statement on, he was asked questions about why the invite was given to Prime Minister Modi, and this is what he said.
We are in the role, Canada is in the role of the G7 chair, and in those discussions, as agreed with our G7 colleagues, include important discussions on energy security, on digital future, critical minerals, amongst others, and partnerships actually in building infrastructure in the emerging and developing world. There are certain countries that should be at the table for those discussions, and in my capacity as G7 chair, consultation with others, some others, make those determinations. India, the fifth largest economy in the world, effectively the most populous country in the world, central to a number of those supply chains, at the heart of a number of those supply chains, so it makes sense. And in addition, bilaterally, we have now agreed, importantly, to continued law enforcement dialogue. So there's been some progress on that. It recognizes issues of accountability. I extended the invitation to Prime Minister Modi in that context, and he has accepted.
Right. So let's get reactions. Ambassador Dilip Sinha, before I open it up, like when you hear that statement, he's a little bit on the back foot explaining to sort of the more extreme elements in his community why this invitation was issued. Do you believe that we should have accepted?
I think we should have accepted. After all, we must remember that the G7 countries are important for us. We need them both for our economic development and for our various other aspects of our global relations. In this situation, I don't think we should be rejectful of what the invitation and the overture that Mark Carney has made. It is important that we try and put the past behind us. It will not be easy because, as you say, there are very strong, powerful elements in Canada that are opposed to this kind of a relationship. But there's no harm in making an attempt and see if Mark Carney can make a break from the past.
Let's open this up. Kushal, do you think Carney is going to make a break from the past, given his very qualified, careful statement and given the images we just saw on the streets of Canada?
Well, there are old habits. They die hard. It takes time for old habits to change. As far as Canada is concerned, I think performative outrage is a Canadian art form. And, they are very good at it. They have made a virtue out of obnoxious behavior. And it's been happening over a period of time. Just yesterday, we had the horrific news in Canada of the Holocaust Memorial being vandalized. The Holocaust Memorial. See, this is a country that invites Nazis to a parliament. Then they invite Khalistani rappers to the BC legislature. They might have even sung a song for Bhindranwale. So we don't know. Anything can happen. And they make a virtue out of these things. But you cannot attribute any of that to Mark Carney because you have to remember the Canadian political system. In that sense, is very similar to India. It's very top-down. So if the Prime Minister decides, I want to stay away from this in Canada, people will stay away from it. So it's very clear if you study Mark Carney's campaign. Can you show me one photo of Mark Carney with a Khalistan flag in the background? You cannot. I can show you photos of Pierre Poilievre. I can show you photos of Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh. So he might as well write Khalistan on his forehead. So if we go by that yardstick, Mark Carney is staying away. Similarly, we have an example in the past from a Canadian Prime Minister. That was Prime Minister Harper. He was following the same pattern. Stay away from all these things. And I think we can be cautiously optimistic with Mark Carney as of now. Now, people might say, oh, Sukh Taliwal came in, and made these rabid statements on CBC. I understand all of that. Like I said, the Khalistanis and the Canadian left are, they are a match made in heaven. So they have integrated very much into the system, and remnants of that system are going to be there. And let's see how Carney deals with them over a period of time. We've already seen speeches of Khalistanis making active threats in a couched way. I mean, they think it is couched to the Prime Minister of India. So let's see what it happens. I think I'm cautiously optimistic with Mark Carney on this subject, not on the whole subject of Canada in general. But on this subject, I'm actually cautiously optimistic.
Daniel, do you share Kushal and Ambassador Dilip Sinha's cautious optimism? Because the fact is that as long as there is a legitimacy to Khalistani protests, Khalistani statements that target the Prime Minister, that target Indian diplomats, that have open sort of separatism as an agenda, and they're allowed in the guise of free speech, what is really changing? I take Kushal's point that Carney is not Trudeau. I take that point, but is he fundamentally different?
Yeah, so to understand Canada, I mean, I agree with my previous commentators here. If you're looking at this of like, is Canada going to make a decision under Carney to choose like India over Pakistan or economic stability over lunatics raving around on the streets? It's not going to be that. Now, I understand because you saw Justin Trudeau and the Trudeau administration. We chose lunatics on the streets, waving swords, screaming nonsense over economic prosperity. That was a Trudeau thing, right? That was Trudeau. We value terrorism over Canada. Like that was very front and center. Mark Carney, it's going to be, I'll deal with everyone. So now instead of like, listen, Modi was a villain to Justin Trudeau, Jagmeet Singh. And if there was like some cannibal in Liberia who went around murdering and eating gay people, but said, my goal is to overthrow Western civilization because of colonialism, he would have been welcome in Canada as a LGBTQ human rights activist. Like that's kind of where our brains are at. Now, everyone's kind of on the same level. Do you have money? Do you have this? Carney will play with you. And I think the more significant thing, like to understand Mark Carney, all right, so last week, at the beginning of Eid, he gets up and does the whole thing, Muslim values are Canadian values, and everyone panders. But the organization he did that in front of, the Muslim Association of Canada, is openly Muslim Brotherhood. On their own website, they say, we're based on the values of Hassan al-Banna, the founder of Muslim Brotherhood. Used to say Muslim Brotherhood on their website. They changed it a little bit, but they're hardcore Muslim Brotherhood. They're a big problem with our trying to build alliances. And Trudeau ran into this, where he would embrace the Muslim Brotherhood, the most radical Islamic faction in Canada, and they'd go to countries in the Gulf and be like, I love Muslim, but then he would run into this fact that they wouldn't want to deal with him because they're against the extremists that he's propping up. So this was the non-understanding. Mark Carney 1 week goes and does I'm here with the Muslim Brotherhood, but then he also invites Mohammed bin Salman to the G7 as well, who Justin Trudeau also got into a tiff with. I mean, there's not a country in the world that Justin Trudeau didn't start something with. Or a country that Canada needed. It's like, listen, we started stuff with every single country. We got into with the Philippines somehow, Saudi Arabia. It was a real masterclass in diplomacy. Yeah. But now, so we're inviting, we're hanging out with the Muslim Brotherhood, but then we're also inviting Mohammed bin Salman, who came to power by basically culling the Muslim Brotherhood, even in his own family. So it's sort of, the Carney mentality is sort of like, okay, you got $1 billion, let's play. You could be a cannibal warlord in Liberia, but if you have money, you can play. And you could be Indian. You can have real economic growth, and you can play.
So what does that mean for Indian interests?
It means I think Indian interests and Canadian interests, like, they can work together. We could probably improve things. But I would never expect Canada under Mark Carney to do something like crack down on terrorism in the streets. There's going to be no crackdown on terrorism because we don't want that. But if you can play Mark Carney, the image Mark Carney wants to show is sort of like stability and economic prosperity. So the general way that Canadians deal with extremism on our streets, especially when liberals are in charge, is stick our heads in the sand and look the other way. Because if we don't see it, it's not real.
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't.
So as Kushal is saying in the chat, Mark Carney's main message is, I'm not Trudeau, but is that enough for India? And I think that's the key point. And as Daniel just said, it clearly is not, and there is going to be no crackdown on these Khalistani groups. Sanjay, for you, this is personal, right? I mean, for every Indian, it's personal, but for you, it's deeply personal as a victim of the Kanishka bombing, for which there has never been justice. And, there has almost been kind of convenient amnesia. And I know that you've undertaken a trip recently to try, as the anniversary of this bombing comes up, to try and drive home the need for justice here. Tell us a little bit about your experience. I also know that you firsthand witnessed the role of Pakistan, the nexus between Pakistan and these Khalistani groups. You saw Pakistan organized buses, basically herding Khalistani protesters into vehicles and driving them to, to the press club. So talk a little bit about what you saw, Sanjay.
Thank you, Barkha. Yes, Kanishka, as everyone would know, is actually the forgotten tragedy, both in India and to a great extent in Canada. We've never got justice, and people have not really been brought to account for what happened. Yes, I lost my entire family, and I've dedicated this entire the last few years, but particularly this year, traveling around the world to talk to people, to bring into effect, let people remember what it was. There was an event, of course, Kushal was there in just outside Toronto, in Hamilton, on the Kanishka. There was a 2-day seminar. There was another event I went to Ottawa for. There was in Washington, D.C., at the National Press Club. And this is strange, because also, coincidentally, we had Dr. Tharoor.
Is this the picture, the one on your screen?
Yes. In fact, there are more pictures. There's a video as well. And
can we please play the video? Can you pull up the video, please? Yeah, go ahead, Sanjay.
The strange thing is, I didn't know who the guy was, busing them to the National Press Club in DC on 14th Street. But they were screaming, and we were walking into the National Press Club. And,
there's the bus. There's the bus.
Yeah, you can see the Pakistani flag. It's in one of the there. You'll see the Pakistani flag. The guy I found out from Rohit, who's a Washington DC correspondent, he says that guy is a journalist, and they'd actually brought the Khalistanis to the National Press Club door, on both doors, parked them down so that they could do this Khalistan Zindabad, kill Modi politics, kill Modi politics. And of course, Dr. Tharoor and company, were after us. They were doing their... Yeah. So this is, it's very clearly, and if I remember, Terry Milowski had written many years back, that Khalistan is a Pakistan project. It's an ISI project. And it's become so clear and evident because these guys were there. There's a Pakistani flag. I just seen the video that you've shown in Vancouver. It's got the same in Calgary. It's got the same Pakistani flag. So they're out in the open with what they're doing. And they've got the finances, the encouragement, everything coming. And incidentally, also the Sikhs for Justice, Pannun's office is one floor below in the National Press Club. I'm sure you're aware. Room 1111. Yes, he's there. So they started gearing the building, trying to scare people away. But I don't think it worked. People went away with both events, and it was absolutely trouble-free. But this raises the important point: why isn't the United States looking at this? There were Homeland Security people at both the events. There was obviously the intelligence agencies, which I don't want to get into. But no one points out that you can see Pakistan's brazen support and brazen encouragement of these guys, and yet no action, nothing happens. Pakistan is still minting cryptocurrencies for the US business people, and there are deals happening, their real estate. I don't think you probably have a Trump Tower there very soon. So it's quite troublesome for us. The other thing is Canada and Mark Carney's invitation. I welcome it. Though I know he's really done it, with a gun to his head, literally, with all the other 6 nations forcing it. But, it has to be understood. You can't have a G7 meet on trade and commerce and not have India. You can't have a meet on the global south and not have India. India has surpassed all G7 nations in GDP growth in 2024. We are the 4th largest economy. We consume more than 6 out of the 7 G7 nations. And we are the largest, top 5 defense spender after USA and Germany. So how can you have any meet on security or global south or Pacific cooperation without India?
But can I ask you, Sanjay, before I go to Ambassador Sinha and also bring Zafar in, as a personal victim of the Kanishka bombing, imagine just for a moment, losing your entire family on board that plane that is blown up by Khalistani terrorists. what is the response you found as you tried to renew awareness around this issue and ask for justice and to bring the perpetrators to justice? What was the response in Canada? What was the response in the United States? And there is also this question which I want to put to Ambassador Sinha of the US role in this, because even when it comes to the Niger issue or the documents placed in a court in the Gurpatwant Pannun case, there is an American role in this, which we should talk about.
Well, Barkha, I got a tepid response in Canada. It was the first, and I sensed fear. There is still large-scale fear about anybody talking about Kanishka or Khalistani role in it. And the only people I found were, strong Indian Hindu groups who know Kushal and Daniel very well, who are bold enough to speak about it. And which is one of the reasons why I find it necessary for me to constantly make trips back there to remind people that this happened. People want to forget, especially in Canada. I'd say that of India as well. I have not seen any action from my government in 40 years, frankly. I've been writing letters to a number of prime ministers and ministers. I've not seen that. But in the US, I saw a very, very interesting uptick of people wanting to know more. And when I say uptick, I meant from a governmental agent angle. They want to build up more information on the Khalistani groups. And this includes the intelligence agencies. They want to get more information about who the sleeper cells are. They have now realized that they're not only controlling arms and ammunition, but drugs. And that's their new funnel, their new pipeline for funding. So there's great interest. There is interest. And I've been invited back, hopefully in the next few months. I will be traveling back and forth, up and down between North America and India trying to do this.
So thanks for sharing that. Ambassador Sinha, if I can bring you in, and then Zafar after that. The American role, right? Carney was also pushed on the whole Niger case and he kind of ducked those questions. Where do you see that playing out? And given that Daniel, Kushal both make the point that Carney's distinction right now is only to say, I'm not Trudeau, that's an improvement, but is it enough? If Khalistani groups are going to continue to flourish, what changes for India?
You see, when Mark Carney said at that press conference that there is a dialogue on law enforcement taking place in India on issues like accountability, I think we should take up on this point and then bring in all this accountability of Kanishka bombing, all the activities of the Khalistani terrorists there. We must hold these countries accountable for their actions also. We cannot simply be on the defensive and talk about the allegation that they are making. So we have to do our homework. And if the Pakistani embassy is involved in Khalistani activities over there, we must get the evidence out. After all, in the case of Operation Sindoor, where we sent out these large delegations across the world, who are trying to highlight Pakistan's role in terrorism and in promoting terrorism against India. This is what we have to highlight. And if this has been done at the level of parliamentary delegations, we should also do it at the level of the official level talks that are taking place, whether with Canada or with the US. And we should take up these matters with these countries and do our homework, get the evidence out and produce it before them. And we have to hold them responsible for their actions as well.
Zafar, you spent a long time covering both Jammu, Kashmir and Punjab. And in Punjab, there is a kind of peculiar paradox that we are confronted with. All surveys, there are Pew surveys that show there is zero traction. Well, I won't say zero, but minuscule traction for Khalistan in Punjab, right? Minuscule traction. I think more than 95% of people in the Pew survey said we have no engagement with the Khalistan issue. But you have mass migration to Punjab. And I think Kushal, one of the things he had said at one point, and I'd be curious to know where he stands today, is stop sending our students there. But you have families, everybody has a relative there, and it becomes very difficult, even, compared to India, Pakistan, where there is no active engagement between India and Canada. There are families, you have everybody in Punjab has somebody studying in Canada, somebody working in Canada. How do you see what the issues involved here are?
The point is, when you go to Canada, when you go to Punjab and for reporting and all that, you see that half of the Punjab is already left for abroad and the other half is aspiring to go. This is the reality in Punjab. So,
Yeah.
the problem is that all these people who go to Canada for jobs, for other purposes, they sort of get brainwashed here. As you were rightly pointing out, Kushal uh, made a good analysis of this in our in the last debate discussion that we had. That this is
Yeah.
the problem. That when these youngsters go there for studies, for other purposes, that's the time when the problem arises, and people have to be more careful about them. But also the fact is that Kushal had only pointed it out, that it is the ecosystem that works there. It does not matter which government is in power, who is leading that country. That really does not matter, and that is the fact when you see Khalistanis openly out that rally and people carrying Pakistani flag. But there can be no bigger evidence than this. If the Prime Minister of Canada is serious, then at least he should have some sort of an arrangement, some sort of a system in place to stop these things from happening just before the Prime Minister of India is going to visit that country, and that does
Yeah.
not seem to be true.
Yeah, I think this is a very important point. Does India just ignore these images? Kushal, let's bring you in. Why are you cautiously optimistic? Why? Kya badla hai?
Well, I'll give you 2, 3 examples of what has changed. What has changed is that Carney calling Modi has led to nothing less than a mini meltdown in Canadian Khalistani circles. How do we know? We follow these people, right? They have special love for me. So everything I say, they will write Nietzsche. They have their standard 4 anti-Hindu slurs. They will use their, one involves urine, one involves cow dung, one involves something else, and it's always there. Every message of mine will have those 4 slurs. So there is nothing sort of less than a mini meltdown over here. You have to live in Canada to understand how much of an effort it is to even call an Indian Prime Minister to a G7 summit. I am not exaggerating. It is actually a gigantic achievement that Mark Carney has done that. 2, we knew on Ambassador point, the statement issued by the Canadian Prime Minister was endorsed by the Indian side also. That means the security concerns, Ambassador Saab, are both Indian and Canadian. This is a dual statement. That means they have to look at our security concerns and we have to look at their security concerns. Now, what is interesting on the Canadian landscape is that until and unless, and on that student bit, yes, my stand has now slightly nuanced. Pehle I used to say, don't send your kids to Canada. Now I say, call your kids back to India. So it has improved even more. They say, please.
But who is doing that? That's not the reality on the ground in
The
Punjab.
number,
See, both things are true. Kushal, sorry to interrupt you, but both things are true. Minuscule traction for Khalistan and Punjab, yet some sort of economic, subcultural push towards Canada. Both of these things are happening simultaneously.
So the number of applications to Canada, even in Punjab, has dropped. You can go and talk to immigration agents. There has been umpteen coverage of that. In fact, the number of people wanting to go to Canada in India overall has dropped. They don't want to go there. They are looking for other pastures. That is point number 1. Now, yes, there was this news report last week, a very unfortunate incident of a kid committing suicide because his Canada visa got rejected in Punjab. I know about that news, but that is the aberration, not the norm. It is changing now. It's not like see, the story is Punjab has a failed economy. Nobody wants to talk about that. All right. Punjabi politicians have failed Punjab, cutting across party lines. They have failed Punjab. Now, but I don't want to make this discussion about what is wrong with Punjab, because that's not the aim.
That's not the remit of this conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. So
so quickly, because I want to get Daniel, Sanjay, and Ambassador in. Why the optimism? Kya badla hai? You didn't answer that.
Well, the optimism lies that it was impossible under a Justin Trudeau for Prime Minister Modi to be invited, even for a G7. I'm being very straight up. It was impossible for an election campaign to happen in Canada without a politician having a Khalistani picture in their background. It happened under Mark Carney. It was impossible under the last administration for CSIS to share active intelligence with RNAW. It has started happening.
Okay.
It has started happening.
Daniel, do you agree? Do you agree that something has changed?
Again, Kushal, political parties in Canada are cults of personality of the leader. Okay, the leader controls it. It has whip thing. There are checks and balances in power. Not a Canadian value. We might think we have it, but here's a Canadian political mentality. Here's a Canadian political mentality. We are so proud and so self-righteous that we know more on average about how American politics works than the average American, because we are smarter and better than them. But everyone who has that mentality has no idea how Canada works. Not a single clue how our own country works. But we're much just it's okay. So understand that mentality. Okay. So it's cult of personality of the leader. Mark Carney is better than Justin Trudeau. So it's going. I'm not going to say it's going to be good. I'm not saying Canada is going to be your new best friend.
Yeah.
We are saying that the irritant that was Canada, which was on like maximum like scratchy thing inside your throat that you can't possibly to like just mild annoyance, right? And this is the state of Canada, that we're proud that we're just going to be a minor annoyance potentially. Like it's about progress, right? So yes, we might have been at negative 99.999% on a lot of things, but we're going up. So Canada, you're like, you're at negative 83% on the terrorism index. That's bad. Any objective means, yes. But contrast to where Canada was 15 minutes ago, hey, we're doing great. So
yeah. So basically, it's like marginal changes. And the big change that both of you are identifying in serious terms, Ambassador Sinha, is that these flags won't be behind Carney in the way that they were behind Trudeau. My question is, when the Prime Minister is there, if we are to see aggressive Khalistani protests, and clearly Canada allows these protests, how are we going to, or how should we be responding?
Well, I won't like to say that whether we are optimistic, cautiously, or otherwise. We have to be realistic about this. There is a genuine movement in Canada led by these Khalistanis. They suffered a bit of a setback in the last election, and there was a big change in the leadership from Trudeau to Carney. So we have to respond positively to the effort that Carney has made. We should not let him down at this stage. But yes, if tomorrow he doesn't respond to our concerns, then we'll have to go back to our own and protect our
But can I ask you something? There's one thing that is different between when we were, in that stage of cold freeze with Trudeau and now, and that is that, I don't know if you would use the word tensions, but the disagreement with Trump over Operation Sindoor. He keeps, making this point about claiming a role for himself that we keep denying. Now, but Canada has had its own tensions with Trump. So there is all of this geopolitical churn also happening in North America. I'm just wondering, Ambassador, how you see that and our own tensions with the Trump administration over Operation Sindoor.
Yeah, I referred to that when I said that the G7 itself is going through a series of problems internally.
Correct.
And in fact, the Canadians should thank Trump for making them realize that they are not exactly a fringe of on the American border, but a country in their own right. And they are at last kind of realizing that they need to assert their own nationalism. So they should thank Trump for that. But what we have to look at is that the G7 countries are important for us. They are our largest markets. They are our largest trading partners. We need them for our economic development. And if Carney has invited us today, we should respond to his invitation and take it at its face value and move along on the dialogue on terrorism and the Khalistani activities. By all means, we should push them and press them for action. But on the economic front, we should cooperate with them and see how far we can go. Their internal problems in the G7 are important, and that is one of the reasons why other countries are reaching out to countries like India, because they are reaching out to other democracies. There's the Ukraine war. There's Zelensky will be there at this summit as well. So they have serious problems that they are facing. And India can be a country of some importance because of our international standing, our participation in the global supply chains, and the fact that we want to increase our performance in this. We cannot possibly increase our performance in supply chains without reaching out to the G7.
Yeah.
So we have to realize that.
Sanjay, let's bring you in at this point. You also spoke about the loneliness of this of the Kanishka battle vis-a-vis successive Indian governments, our governments, right? And I think that's worth also underlining. Like, Prime Minister's there. I mean, maybe he can make a public comment about what happened to, and this is not only about the BJP, this has been every government. It's been, as you said, a buried headline. Just last thoughts from you, Sanjay.
Well, I've written to both the Prime Minister as well as the Foreign Minister, and I hope they take it up. But one very important point on how Carney has changed things. For the first time this year in 40 years, we will have the Canadian and the Irish embassies having a memorial in Delhi, a service which they've never had before. And the Indian government officials and Air India are likely to attend it. And it's made, it's a significant change. I can see Carney is changing things, trying to change, and he needs us desperately. I do believe there is a trade deal likely to happen in the next few months from the sources I've heard in both Canadian and Indian governments. So don't be too off the mark. He's going to control things. I think he's got to make a difference to show. And one other important point we missed. Not only Carney invite, P.A. Poilievre has also approved this invitation and made a comment that we need to sell our gas because America is breathing down our neck. So, it's a very important thing.
I think this news about the memorial is extremely significant because it's never even been acknowledged, frankly. So I think that's good work done by you and everybody who's working on this. Zafar, before I give Kushal a quick last word, if you want to come in with what you think might be the key concerns while Prime Minister is there.
I think the law enforcement conditions that have been put by Canada should apply both ways. As Sanjay ji was saying, that making people aware about Kanishka is a big thing in itself. If Canada has concerns, so has India. The way that these Khalistanis are openly going about making rallies and glorifying the killers of a former prime minister, giving open threats that they will shoot down a flight. Threats cannot be bigger than this. So this law enforcement conditions, I think, should apply both ways. We can't only see them from the prison of Canada.
Yeah. Kushal, just a quick comment before we close, picking up on Sanjay's point that Carney needs India. There is an economic dimension to this.
Carney doesn't need India. Canada,
right.
Canada
I should
needs
say
India.
Canada. Yes.
Justin Trudeau, see, his legacy is undoing everything good about Canada. I want to reiterate, this is a beautiful country with amazing people. What Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh did to Canada in 9 to 10 years is something that is going to be studied on what not to do. If the book was ever written, what not to do in politics, the photo should be Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh. They destroyed a country that is so amazing.
Yeah.
And just look at the economic parameters, in all the OECD nations or other parameters. Canada is the worst of all of these big nations. Canada is doing worse in every parameter. For Carney, this is a Herculean task. He will have to mend his relations with India because Trump is Looney Tunes. I don't know what Trump thinks in the morning, what he says in the evening. What was that line in क्या साधु और शैतान में वो शादी किसी करती है प्यार किसी और से करती है और उसके दिमाग में कोई तीसरा होता है. That is Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Nobody knows what Trump thinks. So to me, this is why the relationship will improve because Carney is a very practical man. And remember, $29 billion of Brookfield were invested in India. Never forget that.
Well, I just think that we will watch out as Indians to see whether Canada can enforce the basic respect that is due to the Indian Prime Minister when he's there, what kind of shape and form the Khalistani protests in courts will take, backed by Pakistan, on the sidelines of this G7 summit. All of you seem to agree that the Prime Minister should have accepted this, that it's a significant thing, that there was a meltdown that is continuing in the pro-Khalistani networks of Canada. So I think, as they say, watch this space. Thank you very much, gentlemen, to Daniel, to Sanjay, to Ambassador, to Kushal, to Zafar. Thank you. And we'll keep a close eye on that G7 summit. Keep watching the Mojo story. Thank you and see you soon. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.